Let us pray. Most loving and gracious God, who created each one of us in your image, help us to not only see the divine in one another, but to relentlessly pursue deeper understanding, greater wholeness, fuller dignity, and justice. Also enkindle in us a spirit of healing and reconciliation that we can repair what has been torn, grow together, and walk forward as one. We hold dearly to the promise that you have not only created for us this world, your fragile island home, but have also promised a heavenly dwelling place, a mansion prepared just for us. Allow that truth to stir in us a desire for all your children to have safe and affordable housing. May this evening be an occasion for celebrating the strides that have been made and your faithful servants that are indeed doing holy, divine work. May it also be an opportunity to see the road ahead, to open our eyes widely to human need, and to gird ourselves to do the work to which you have called us. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, whose outstretched arms upon the cross drew all people to his saving and loving embrace. Amen.
Hello and good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Ellsworth Weaver, the president of this Fauquier County branch of the NAACP and a charter member of the Community Action Team, better known as CAT, with the Warrenton Police Department. It is my distinct honor and most high privilege to have been asked to welcome you to our 66th Freedom Fun celebration. That has a ring. I want to thank each of you for being with us tonight. And I'm very delighted to welcome those of you who have been supportive of this event in the past, as well as those who are joining us and sharing this great experience for the first time. This is such a beautiful occasion. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Julius D. Spain Sr. And I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this. First of all, he's a Gold Life member of the NAACP. He's the president of the Arlington branch of the NAACP, and he's our regional vice president for Region 3 of the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, he's a former Master Gunnery Sergeant in the United States Marines. Mr. Spain.
Good evening and thank you, good Reverend Doctor, and to everyone who's joining with us today. I've had some good days. I've had some hills to climb. I've had some weary days and lonely nights. But good Reverend, you know, when we look around and we think things over, all of our good days, they outweigh our bad days. And we're not going to complain. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this evening. I look forward to this event. On behalf of the elected leaders of the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP, where our current president, Robert Barnett, resides, we welcome you, we welcome you, we welcome you.
Thank you, Mr. Spain, for your words of encouragement. One thing I will say about you, sir, you have always been a motivating type person. So therefore, we won't complain. We just keep on pushing. I think that was the impressions back in the day. We also have the privilege of having with us tonight some special people that we will give recognition to. Mr. Carter Neville, he's the mayor of the town of Warrenton, Virginia. Is he with us tonight?
Yes, he is.
Thank you. Sheriff Robert P. Moser, the Fauquier County Sheriff's Office. Is he here?
Yes, he is.
Mr. Mosette Petway. He's the president of the Spotsylvania branch of the NAACP, branch number 7117. Is he with us tonight?
Not that I can see.
Chief of Police Mike P. Koch of the Warrenton Police Department. Now, you've heard me mention some names, and it seems like we all are familiar with the big wheels and they're turning. But every once in a while, we have to look back and see what's responsible for making these wheels turn. So I want to recognize tonight Deputy Chief Timothy M. Carter. And the reason I'm doing that is this, because on June 4th, 1992, he started with the Warrenton Police Department and has since become the first African-American officer to achieve the ranks of sergeant, lieutenant, deputy chief of police, and interim chief of police. He's also a charter member of the Community Action Team, better known as CAT, with the Warrenton Police Department. Mr. Carter. Always there is what we call the support. We don't see these people sometimes, but their presence makes the wheel turn. And one such person is Betty Compton. Betty is a volunteer coordinator with the Public Information and Community Engagement Officer with the Warrenton Police Department and has been a charter member of CAT since June of 2020. Another one of those folk behind the scene is Officer Shay Fuller. On July 17th, 2017, Shay Frances Alexandra Fuller became the first Warrenton Police to become, with the Warrenton Police, was the first female African-American police officer. The next person to recognize is Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. She's a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, District number 31. Also, last but not least, Mr. Michael A. Ewing. He is the chairman and CEO of the Oakview National Bank. Thank you for being who you are. Tonight, I'm very proud of the NAACP and what it has accomplished. The National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, better known as the NAACP, was established on February 12th, 1909, and is America's oldest, largest, and most widely recognized, and as Mr. Spain would say, and the baddest grassroots-based civil rights organization there is in America. It was founded in New York City by white and Black advocates in response to the ongoing violence against African Americans across this country. In the NAACP's early decades, its anti-lynching campaign was very, very central to its agenda. During the civil rights era of the 1950s and 1960s, the group won major legal victories. One of the key organization victories was the United States Supreme Court 1954 decision in Brown versus the Board of Education, which outlawed segregation in public schools. In the final decades of the 20th century, the NAACP experienced financial difficulties, and some of its members charged that the organization lacked direction. But I'm glad to say that today, the NAACP is focused on such issues as inequality in jobs, education, healthcare, affordable housing, the criminal justice system, as well as protecting voting rights. The group also has pushed for the removal of Confederate flags and statues from public properties. By 2021, that's right today, the NAACP has more than 2,200 branches and more than 500,000 members worldwide. This time, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Mike Hammond, who is the co-chair of the Education Committee. Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Each year, the NAACP, through generous donations from community members, is able to provide $500 scholarships to outstanding students at our local high schools. It is the duty of our dedicated scholarship committee to determine the most outstanding individuals to receive these awards. Scholarships are available for applicants who will attend accredited trade, vocational, and technical schools, community colleges, and four-year colleges and universities. To be eligible for our scholarships, students must have a 2.5 grade point average. Scholarships are awarded for academic achievement, outstanding citizenship, leadership, service, and extracurricular activities. Minority applicants, applicants who face financial or personal hardships, and those who are dedicated to improving the local community are encouraged to apply. This year, we selected 3 outstanding students from 11 applicants. Each of these students are unique, talented, driven individuals. We are excited to be able to help them on their journey into higher education. They are Rachel Singleton from Fauquier High School, Yaneli Martinez Jimenez from Liberty High School, Nia Rogers from Kettle Run High School. We look forward to the opportunity to award scholarships for the upcoming class of 2022. We thank you, those who have donated to the scholarship fund, and we thank you in advance for those who will donate to the scholarship fund. You all make it possible for us to give these students a helping hand and a leg up. I'll turn the time now over to Ms. Taryn Weaver for our Fauquier Branch Year in Review.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm excited. And I'm just so excited that you all are here to support our mission. My task tonight is to give you highlights of our year in review. Next time. If you look at the picture to your left, you will see a gorgeous group of people. And we are at one of our in-person meetings, and this is before COVID-19. And that night, we were privileged to have our 3rd Regional Vice President, Julia Spain. The photo to your right, well, it shows the new way of meeting like we're doing tonight, after COVID. The Black Lives Matter Vigils for Action began in June of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, and have continued every Saturday since then. The first vigil was organized by Scott Christian, Secretary of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, and Chair of our Criminal Justice Committee. Soon after, Fauquier NAACP became one of 6 sponsors of the vigils. I just want to thank all who participate and have been doing this for over 62 weeks. The Health Committee, chaired by Kathy Marmette, conducted health equity forums twice during the year. Their focus was primarily on mental health. The moderator for those forums was Mrs. Darlene Kelly. One of our special guests that night was Reverend Dr. Tyrone Champion of Community Touch and True Deliverance. As you just heard from Mike Hammond, one of the co-chairs for the Education Committee, he spoke in terms of awarding scholarships to a student at each of our 3 local high schools. Our goal for 2022, with your help, is to increase the amount of our scholarships and to include Southeastern Alternative School and Lord Fairfax Community College. Our health committee, understanding the needs of families for food due to unemployment, created a program called Nourishing Our Neighbors, better known as NON. They fed families that were living in some of the local motels. Not a good place to prepare home-cooked, nourishing meals. Members of the health committee worked with local restaurants and caterers to feed 63 families. What a blessing that was. The co-chairs of the co-chairs of the Community and Economic Development Committee, John Dole and Joe Washington, met with the Fort Pierre Chamber of Commerce to determine whether the chamber would be a good fit for the NAACP. Well, we were, and so we joined. We also participate in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, led by Mrs. Elizabeth Rose of Habitat for Humanity and the Chamber. On June 19, 2021, the Fort Pierre County NAACP branch was one of the sponsors for the first Juneteenth celebration ever in the town of Warrenton, Virginia. This event was held at Eva Walker Park. The committee members, along with Barry Newman, the event organizer, worked tirelessly in making this event a success. Strawberry soda, anyone? If you missed the event this year, please be sure to join us next year. The Housing Committee, co-chaired by Miggy Strano and Conway Porter, are making inroads in Fort Pierre County regarding affordable housing. The committee is working to help eliminate the disparity in housing in Fort Pierre, as you will hear in a video presentation later in the program. The Criminal Justice Committee met with Sheriff Moser. It was a great meeting. We discussed the importance of positive countywide citizen engagement. Dr. Weaver, as you heard earlier, is an original charter member of the Community Action Team, better known as CAT, that meets monthly with Chief Cockers, I always say his name wrong, please forgive me, officers of the Warrenton Police Department and selected community members. The Criminal Justice Committee members are taking part in the Sheriff's Office Ride Along program. I did my first one earlier this month with one of the deputies. It was an awesome experience. I mean, awesome. I saw communities in the county I've never seen before or even knew existed. And I still can't get that beeping sound from the radar detector out of my head. President Weaver has been accepted to the First Citizens Police Academy. Each participant must volunteer a minimum of 10 hours per year. In the Warrenton Police Volunteer Program, Dr. Weaver completed his first ride-along this week. You go, President Weaver. And now I must bring this to an end. So thank you all so much. Now that you have had a glimpse of what we've accomplished, join us. There is much more to do. At this time, I would like to introduce you to our Housing Committee co-chairs, Miggy Strano and Conway Porter. Again, thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Fauquier County NAACP Freedom Fund celebration. I want to thank you all for joining us. My name is Conway Porter, and I'm the Housing Committee co-chair, and I'm joined by co-chair Miggy Strano. We have about a 10-minute presentation that highlights some of our Fauquier communities, residents, and the work our committee is doing to make sure everyone has the opportunity to live in safe, quality, affordable housing in our county. Now I'll turn this over to my co-chair, Mickey Strano.
We'll quickly cover our Housing Committee mission, then we'll highlight some of our local Fauquier communities, give you a quick overview of some key statistics that are driving our local NAACP's advocacy focus with some local resident stories, and then we'll talk about what's next. Our Housing Committee first met in November of 2020. We reviewed the NAACP guidance on our mission and discussed local conditions and determined that advocating for more affordable housing options, as well as ensuring existing communities, specifically our minority communities, are not being left behind, should be our highest priority. The Virginia General Assembly continues to make strides toward ensuring fair housing for all, but there is more work to be done, and it's important that our local branch remain vigilant in this regard by ensuring equitable housing practices in our county. Fauquier County is a great place to live, and there are a variety of neighborhoods to lay your head. So let's get started with a review of some of our Fauquier communities and housing types, specifically highlighting some historically African American communities that have a rich history in this county. We can't overlook, though, that people are struggling to afford to stay in the community they love, and that it's getting increasingly difficult for local workers to find housing here.
So Karen, give me a historical perspective on the Black neighborhoods in Fauquier County, maybe starting with Reconstruction up until today. Thank you, please.
Thank you. From Reconstruction, the communities thrived, and there were various businesses and organizations to benefit the African American on an individual basis as well as community, family oriented. With segregation, many people left the county to gain opportunities for further education and employment. The employment for African Americans was not the best here in the county, and jobs are not always suitable for one's degrees once they gain them from a four-year college. And people, as they leave, they tend to gain employment in other places and they live there. So the population has declined to less than 8% as a whole. So the membership within the churches has declined. Once integration happened here in the county, a lot of the Black community businesses over time ceased to exist, and affordable housing wasn't happening either. So that's about it.
Let me ask you, how do you feel about affordable housing in Fauquier County?
I think that it leaves something to be desired.
Yeah.
I think that we need to do a whole lot of work to get people who are either living place to place or don't have adequate shelter, so they have a place that they can come home to and feel comfortable and also feel safe, and so they have something to look forward to.
Do you plan to buy a house here?
I don't know. This area is a little bit expensive.
What would your ideas be about affordable housing in Fauquier?
I feel like there needs to be a lot more affordable housing. Being a case manager for a lot of years, I had to help clients find housing in other areas because there's really nothing really here for them.
Let's take a look at some of the Fauquier County statistics that are driving our advocacy. Lack of affordable housing is a national, state, and region issue because incomes have not kept up with the housing costs, and there's just not enough inventory at various price points due to many issues such as restrictive zoning practices. When housing prices are too high and there's a lack of varying price points, people become cost burdened, leave the community, and experience housing insecurity or homelessness. In the chart, we can see that there are over 4,500 cost-burdened households in Fauquier County. If you want to purchase a home, the median home price in Fauquier is $440,000, where the median household income has a deficit of $10,000 to purchase price. If you look at the projected demand charts, over 73% of the projected for-sale housing demand is for below $400,000, with almost 40% of the demand for under $250,000. For rentals, almost 45% of the projected demand is for under $1,250. How many housing units have you come across with rent under $1,250 or purchase price under $250,000? You only need to take a quick look on Zillow Rentals to figure out that there are about 5 available rentals with the minimum rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in someone's basement being around $1,250 a month.
What happened, we was almost to purchase a house, and we had to put $500 down. I'm not for sure of what it was for, and we gave them our check to realtors. And for some reason, our it fell through. So the owner who was selling the house refused to give it back to us, and the realtor said that they would put it in the escrow and we would get it back, but we never got it back right to this day. And I've called several times, and of course they have switched hands, and no one's gotten back to me at all.
There is an enormous racial wealth gap in our country due to historical and ongoing injustices that have systematically disadvantaged people of color. The U.S. Census Bureau reported in 2019 that nationally, non-Hispanic white households had a median wealth of more than $139,000. That compared with less than $13,000 for Black households and $20,000 for Hispanic households. Home equity makes up a large part of household wealth, so increasing minority home ownership is a key factor in decreasing and ultimately closing the wealth gap. In Fauquier, 85% of the housing units are single-family detached homes, which are the highest price point, with only 7.3% being multifamily, the lowest price point. Overall, the Fauquier homeownership rate is 78.3%, with non-white Hispanics at 80.5%, Hispanic ownership at 56.2%, and Black ownership at 67.9%.
Tell me, what are your thoughts on affordable housing here in Fauquier County?
Well, there's no such thing as affordable houses in Fauquier County.
Okay. Do you think there should be some?
Sure.
All right.
Because Fauquier County depends on the people that lives here to sustain, to be able to stay here. Now, if you go south, Culpeper County, you run into affordable houses. So the income matches the houses where they live at.
There is a large difference in income by housing ownership, with owners having a median income of $112,000 compared to $56,000 for renters, with 46% of renting households earning below $50,000 compared with just 17% of homeowner households. Many of our renters are comprised of young people, lower wage workers, and people on fixed incomes, such as seniors and people with disabilities.
Would you rather live somewhere else?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm ready to get out of here. I've been looking on the internet, online, asking people, riding around. I find them, but it is so expensive, or my credit not too good to get them. So I'm just stuck here, and I want to get out of here. I'm tired of being here.
people of color who are currently or at risk of experiencing homelessness represent 48% of our planning district region, while only accounting for 11.9% of our population. Black Americans and Native Americans are most likely to experience homelessness or a housing crisis nationally, while Black Americans and multiracial Americans are most likely to experience homelessness or a housing crisis in our own planning district.
I have a feeling that in your plan, and it's good, that some folk have been left behind. When I was a youngster, I went to school here in Warrenton at a school called Rosenwald Elementary School, and I graduated from William C. Taylor High School in 1956. At that time, we had communities like Oliver City, Madison Town, and believe, at that time, Hayti was a community. It was not just a street. But what has happened, these communities have dwindled. And I hope in your comprehensive plan that you're not going to leave these people behind that have been psychologically scarred by what has happened to them during their lifetime. Now, what can we do? What can you do?
So what are we doing about it? We're reviewing and providing feedback on town, county, and regional housing plans, leading and promoting community advocacy, collaborating with other nonprofits, local government, and housing organizations, and educating the community on housing resources and conditions. What can you do? Talk to your local town and county elected officials, show up at public hearings, contact the NAACP Housing Committee with your ideas and concerns, and learn more about housing resources and advocacy at our new Housing Corner on our local NAACP page. So let's wrap up by quickly reviewing our new Housing Corner. So make sure you bookmark the Fauquier County NAACP website, and please review our new Housing Corner that has housing resources and advocacy information. It's important we all know what is available to us, not only for ourselves, but to help and provide information to our neighbors. The housing resources range from COVID-19 rent relief programs and eviction helplines, with legal resources to affordable rental searches, first-time homebuyer financial and education resources, and home repair and energy efficiency programs. The advocacy section provides background and education on how we got to where we are today, as well as local housing news and advocacy opportunities as they arise. So please let us know if you have any suggestions for content by reaching out to us at our Fauquier County NAACP email.
Thank you for your attention. And now I would like to introduce Matthew Carlos, co-chair of our Education Committee.
My name is Matthew Carlos, and I will be introducing our distinguished keynote speaker for the evening. Dr. Cameron Webb currently serves as Senior Policy Advisor for Equity on the White House COVID-19 response team. Previously, Dr. Webb was an Assistant Professor of Medicine and Public Health Science and Director of Health Policy and Equity at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. A general internist, Dr. Webb has worked clinically in the university's COVID unit since the beginning of the pandemic. Additionally, he is the founding director of UVA's Health Equity Law and Policy Research Laboratory and is a core faculty member at the university's Equity Center, an initiative for the redress of inequity through community-engaged scholarship. Prior to joining the faculty at UVA, Dr. Webb spent a year as a 2016 White House Fellow in the Obama-Biden administration's Office of Cabinet Affairs, where he served on the My Brother's Keeper Task Force and the White House Healthcare Team. A born and raised Virginian, Dr. Webb received his BA from the University of Virginia, his MD from Wake Forest School of Medicine, and his JD from Loyola University Chicago School of Law. Tonight, I have the pleasure to announce the Fauquier County branch of the NAACP has selected Dr. Webb to receive this year's Trailblazer Award in recognition of Dr. Webb's service and leadership in the fields of healthcare, education, and his continuing involvement in the response to the COVID-19 global pandemic. Congratulations, Dr. Webb. It is now my honor to present tonight's keynote speaker, Dr. Cameron Webb.
Wow. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Mr. Carlos, for that kind introduction. And I have to hold up this beautiful award that was sent to me for this evening. I really appreciate it. Really thoughtful and kind of all of you. And it means a lot to get that recognition from you all. It means a lot to be here with you, to be sitting here, even though it's virtually, with the largest and the oldest, the baddest and the boldest, the most loved and most hated, the most feared and most revered, the most cussed and discussed civil rights organization in the country. When I was a kid, I had a t-shirt that said that. My parents were involved in the NAACP coming up, and it inspired some enthusiasm on my part too. And it's so great to see all that you're doing in community. Now, before I jump in, I want to start by thanking you all for inviting me tonight, and thanking your local president, Dr. Weaver, for bringing me here to participate with you. But it's also great to see some familiar names in the chat, and familiar names on the guest list. I see Delegate Guzman, who's become a friend over the last few years. I see Mike Hammond, who I met 2 years ago and just has a boundless energy. I see Sheriff Moser, who I think it's one thing is very clear: when you have a conversation, you learn the measure of a man. And I really was impressed with Sheriff Moser, and over the course of my campaign for Congress, just having opportunities to speak with him, and it's one of those instances where even though he supported my opponent, I still know the measure of the man. He's a fantastic guy, and I'm really proud of the way that he's working and continuing to serve in your community. And I want to say at the outset, tonight I'm appearing in my personal capacity. That's an important distinction because, of course, I serve a role as a senior policy advisor for equity on the White House COVID-19 response team, but I'm not wearing that hat. I'm not representing or speaking on behalf of the president or of the COVID response team, but instead I'm speaking as a concerned resident of Virginia, as a colleague and a friend, as somebody who's passionate about this Commonwealth and about our communities, and including Fauquier County that I got to know and love over the past several years. I really do wish we could be doing this in person. And so, there's something to be said about being among friends. So I know that you were asked on the front end to keep your cameras off, but if you'll indulge me, please do turn your cameras on. I would love to see your faces. I would love to see you all over the course of this evening. So please do turn on your cameras so I can turn on my gallery mode, and hopefully I can get a sense of when you like what I'm saying or when you don't. That's important to a speaker. And the other thing is it actually did work out for the better that this is virtual. The nature of this pandemic has been really challenging. We've had moments of a lot of improvement, and we've had moments where things have gotten worse. We've seen cases increase, and right now we're in a moment of high transmission. So whereas I was supposed to work in the hospital over the weekend, I actually was asked to come in tonight to work on the COVID units. I'm actually going directly from here to the hospital to work, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm still gonna be here and participate in this conversation because this is important stuff. Two more things. I have to say, I did love the year in review that Mrs. Weaver shared, and I'm so impressed by everything that you all are up to here in Fauquier County. I have to say my favorite event had to be the Juneteenth celebration at Eva Walker Park, because as soon as I heard the name, I smiled. Some of you know this, but many of you don't. But Eva Walker's great-granddaughter is my niece, and her name is Eva Webb. And my brother, Don Jonathan, is married to Eva Walker's granddaughter, Ashley Carter Webb. And so it's just great. Every time I would go by the park, I would think about the beautiful way that life knits us together and connects families and communities. Now, I mentioned to you that I'm working tonight in the hospital. And every time I go back into the hospital, I've spent the whole week working in the White House, and I kind of go back and forth because I didn't want to leave my work clinically in the midst of the pandemic. That was my one request when I came into the administration. I'll share with you a little bit of that story, but I said I wanted to continue to take care of patients in the midst of this pandemic because that's me doing my part. And every time I go into work nights, I remember my very first night working in the hospital as a physician. Shortly after you get that MD, it's pretty terrifying when somebody calls overnight and says, can the patient in bed 7 have a Tylenol? That can be a terrifying page when you're new to the practice of medicine. But for me, I always think back to those moments. I want to quickly share with you a little bit about my experience on my first night. You see, the thing was I got a call, a page that said that one of my patients sadly had stopped breathing. They called what in the hospital where I trained was known as a code blue. And this was, back in the day, because I'm older than I look. And what happened was there was an overhead announcement. They said code blue. They named the room. And I remember sitting in the resident workroom and taking off running because I knew it was my patient. I knew that the physicians who were on during the day told me he was sick and to keep an eye on him. And I remember just taking off for that room and not knowing what to expect. I got there, my senior resident was there, some of the ICU doctors were there, and they asked me to start telling a little bit about the patient, about what brought him in. And I think that that's a really interesting dynamic. You see, in residency, what you learn is that there are a couple of things that you do when there's a code blue in the hospital. And this will make sense how this ties into today's theme in a minute. You see, when there's a code blue in the hospital, you heard what I did. I said I ran, but that's because the first thing that happens is you call for help. If you're the first person who arrives at the bedside and somebody is not breathing, you call for help. Second thing you do is you assess the environment. You take an assessment of the safety. You optimize the environment so that you can serve that individual well. And then after that, then and only then, you check for a pulse. You see, does this person have a pulse? Is their heart still working? Because that's going to drive you down the algorithm of what to do next. And then finally, if there is not a pulse, that's when you start resuscitation. And what I want to do is I want to frame tonight's conversation around this concept of code blue, because Fauquier County, we've been in the midst of a code blue for some time now. And I want you to understand what that means for me, what that means for you, and what that means for us as we move forward. You see, these past 584 days since the first case of COVID here in the United States, this has truly been a code blue. When people talk about, when those code blues are called, it's because a patient can't breathe. And in the context of COVID, people often cannot breathe because of the nature of the illness, because of the way that it impacts the lungs. It causes a really terrible pneumonia for many people. And I've been in the care, I've provided care for so many individuals who have COVID and watch as they've required more and more oxygen. Some of whom I've been able to stabilize, others of whom I've had to send to the ICU. And every time you just realize that we're fighting against something that's new, that's different, and that's incredibly challenging. Before I came on this evening, I looked at the numbers of COVID in Fauquier County, and I saw that there have been over 5,400 cases of COVID in the county. I saw that there have been over 220 individuals hospitalized for COVID. And tragically, I saw that there were 72 individuals who lost their lives from this virus. Those numbers really stand out to me. They strike me because for myself and a lot of other physicians, we can see the faces, we know the names. And if you were involved in taking care of anybody in the earliest days of this pandemic, you know how lonely it was for individuals suffering and struggling with COVID. How terrifying it was that we didn't have any way to intervene, any way to help them. We really had to submit ourselves to the best of what we could think to do and to the best of the best intentions or the plans of a higher power. I think about where we are today because, yes, it's a different moment. We have some different tools, and I'll talk about those later, but the vaccination effort has continued in Fauquier County, and at this point, we've got about just under 60% of the population that's fully vaccinated, or that's received at least one dose of the vaccine, and about 53% who are fully vaccinated. And that's important to keep in mind because it tells you a little bit about where we are and where we still have to go. And the last stat I'll give you about Fauquier and COVID is that the transmission level is high. And lately, if you look at tests from COVID, about 7.5% are positive. In other words, 1 in 13 individuals who gets a test for COVID, a PCR test, it comes back positive. We are not out of the woods yet in Fauquier County. I want to reiterate, we are still in the midst of a code blue. You know, I think back about that moment. I think about my first patient, and I think about the patients I've cared for in this pandemic. I walked you through, you know, some of the steps that you take, but I think about in that first patient, you ask yourself, why did they stop breathing? Why can't they breathe? And that statement, I can't breathe, in the United States in 2021, it resonates a little differently. It hits a little bit differently. That statement, I can't breathe, echoes, you know, the words of George Floyd or Eric Garner or Elijah McClain. It echoes individuals who lost their lives with that as a final utterance. That statement, I can't breathe, makes me think of what's happening to our climate. It makes me think about our environment and the responsibility that we have today to children like my little niece, Eva Webb, making sure that they've got a tomorrow, that they've got the beautiful countryside, the waterways, the places to go hiking and fishing and to love their environment. But even more, there are so many ravages of our climate crisis that we must address so that our children and their children and their children can breathe. I think about the mental health challenges that we're facing, the mental health crises across America, the depression, the anxiety, that feeling that you have when you can't breathe because of the crisis of mental health in our community. So many reasons why people can't breathe at this point in our society. And so it's really important that we take stock of that and we say, well, what can we do? And again, I think back to that very first night that I worked as a physician. I think back about that very first code blue, and I remember what they told me to do. The very first step was to call for help. The very first step. And so in that code blue, when you call for help, who do you look to? You look to community organizations like the NAACP. You look to your teachers. You look to your law enforcement officials. You look to those public servants who are here to take care of you. You look to your faith leaders. You look to legislators like Delegate Guzman. You look to an election in 2020 that brought us a president in President Biden who is ready to press for some change that could help us find our way through this national code blue that we've been in over the past 584 days. The very next thing you do, of course, after you ask for help or you call for help, is you assess your environment. You look around and you see, what am I up against? What is this individual sitting amongst? What are the dynamics that are driving this situation? You know, when I think about assessing our environment, particularly in the context of this pandemic, I think about the challenges with housing. I think about the challenges with healthcare, with education, with food insecurity, with transportation, with the range of so-called social determinants of health that are driving the challenges we're seeing in communities more broadly. I think about that environment that created the dynamic where essential workers disproportionately are Black and brown and disproportionately didn't have the ability to stay home, that privilege of working and sitting in front of their computer and getting tired of going from Zoom to Zoom because they were on public transportation or at the grocery store working and serving so society could keep moving. That's the environment that we have to assess. And if and when we do, we learn that that environment has some challenges. It needs to be optimized. And again, I go back, I think about Ms. Weaver's year in review. It shows that the NAACP has been doing a lot of that work to optimize the environment. I think about that idea, the third step. So you call for help, you assess the environment, and then you check for a pulse. Oh, we've been checking for a pulse. When we check on one another, when we check on our systems and our structures, when we check to say, is anybody home? Is anybody here to help? That is us collectively as a society checking for a pulse. And sometimes we feel it, but when we don't, we recognize that there's so much more that we need to do. And that brings me to the fourth step, of course, which is to start resuscitation. In the code blue, when you realize that there's more that needs to be done, you start resuscitation. And that resuscitation, that's revitalization, that's investment, that's engagement. That is our General Assembly here in Virginia. That is our electoral politics. That is an upcoming governor's race. That is so much that has to do with the big and the small, the near term and the long term. But we start that process of resuscitation now in the midst of the code blue. We don't wait for things to spontaneously get better. We start that process of resuscitation now. Now I walked you through the first couple of steps that you take in a code blue, but I want to be clear. I told you where I was when I got that first page on my very first day as a medical doctor working overnight. And I told you I ran to the page. It's because somebody had told me, and I had seen as a medical student, that when that overhead announcement comes, you've got to get there quickly. You've got to run to the challenges. You've got to run to the problems. You've got to get there fast because people's lives depend on it. The other thing I realized when I walked in the room, I mentioned there were some other people there. And the thing is, in a code blue, everybody has a role. There's a leader. There's the code leader, as we call it, and it's their job to assign the roles to drive people where they need to go. There's the person who's responsible for doing that resuscitation that I described, for doing those chest compressions. There's a person whose job it is to maintain the airway. There's the person whose job it is to start IVs. There's the person whose job it is to keep track of time as you're pushing different medications. Everybody has a role and a responsibility. And I remember this fall in the wake of the election where I was defeated in the political race. I said I stood up because I wanted to help people. There was something that I wanted to do to be of service to individuals. And I remember getting a call 3 days after Christmas from the leadership of the Biden administration saying, we'd love for you to come in and work for this president, to work on this COVID response, to lead our efforts to drive equity. And I remember looking to my wife and saying, if it's a code blue, you got to run to help. And so that's what I'm going to do. We'll figure out the details, but that's what I'm going to do, because in moments like this, you can't say no. You can't say I'm busy. You can't say I'm resting. You can't say it's somebody else's job. You can only say, what can I do? And when asked, when tasked, when charged, you raise your hand. That's what you all have been doing. That's what we all have been doing. That's what we must continue to do. And when I got my particular call, I was asked to lend and to bring my expertise to a challenge. My work at the intersection of health and social justice. How can I bring that into this space to do some good? They asked me to lead the efforts in COVID-19 equity from the White House. And what does that even mean? What does COVID-19 equity mean? I got a lesson in that traveling all across the 5th Congressional District this past year, because what I learned was that there were 21 counties and 2 cities and over 700,000 people and so many different varied experiences, but every single person in that space, every person in this Commonwealth, every person in this country deserves a chance to be healthy, deserves a chance to do well, and deserves a chance to navigate this pandemic and come out on the other side okay. So that's what equity means. It means that we're looking at rural communities and making sure they're not left behind. It means that we're looking at communities of color and making sure they're not left behind. It means that we're looking at the socioeconomic dynamics and making sure that people aren't being left behind. And instead, we're centering that, we're putting it first so that it's never an afterthought. That's what COVID-19 equity means, because the thing is, COVID, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It happened in the context of community. And as we say, although a lot of people call COVID a pandemic, it's in fact a syndemic. I'm gonna put my professor hat on for a second. A syndemic. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention defines syndemic simply as a synergistically interacting epidemic. It means that you've got multiple epidemics layered on top of each other, and the interplay between them creates a maelstrom. It creates a dynamic that's so incredibly challenging. That's what we have with this particular pandemic. And in fact, syndemic theory is concerned with how critical structures and experiential dimensions affect how people get sick, where people get sick, and why people get sick. So when you saw the disproportionate impact of this pandemic on different communities, look no further than the intersection between the epidemics that have plagued communities for far too long. It talks about how there's an amplification of existing health threats and of socioeconomic risk factors, and that's what drives disease outcomes. So those historical, those contemporary, those systemic inequalities, the racism, the violence, those are critical dynamics in determining who has become sick and who will become sick in this pandemic. And you look at those dynamics that they interact with, this virus, this disease that causes so many problems, and you look at the reduced access that some people have to healthcare, or you look at existing chronic conditions and that ongoing challenge, or you look at affordable housing and the way that that's connected to this pandemic. You look at material and psychological deprivation and the way that that affects this COVID pandemic. You look at individuals' job status and the lack of control or the high demands or their working conditions or that status of being labeled essential for the first time in their lives, but it's because we need them to keep going, not because we value them with their paycheck. These are the things that come together to create this unique syndemic, and I cannot leave out education or Mike Hammond's going to be mad at me. And I think that's one of those key issues that we've seen since the very beginning of this pandemic. We saw when we shut down the doors of our schools, when our children went virtual, we saw the digital divide. We saw kids fall behind by months and then years. And we said, what can we do? That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we mean by syndemic. And if we are going to make our way through this, this is how we address it. We don't just address the biological, or we don't just look at the virology. We don't just look at the medications, because the best treatment is to consider the whole dynamic. It's to look at all of these different factors, all these different challenges, and come together. That is what it means to respond in this particular Code Blue. And no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you know the role that you have to play. You know, as I described those statistics in Fauquier County, that this is not over yet. You know that we still have so much more that we need from you. And I know that that's challenging because we've all been digging deep, but if we are going to make it through, not just make it through the clinical condition of COVID, but make it through the societal condition that is this COVID pandemic, we still need you running to that code, playing your role to the best of your ability, because that is the way that we make it through. Now, I would be remiss as somebody who spends all day, every day talking about this pandemic to not acknowledge a few realities. I understand and I recognize that many of you still have some questions about COVID-19 in general. And so I try to take every opportunity to do some rapid fire. You know, we've talked about Code Blue. You know what you got to do. You know we still have work to do, but I just want to acknowledge a few things, because there are a lot of people who don't know the way that we make our way through this pandemic. And in fact, it's just a couple of simple actions. You see, I tell folks this a lot, but fighting COVID-19 is a lot like a boxing match. And the first rule of boxing is to protect yourself at all times. And part of protecting yourself at all times in this pandemic means that if you're older than 12 years old, you've gotten vaccinated. Why? Because the science is unequivocally clear that that is an important thing for you to do. There are very, very, very few exceptions for who is appropriate to be vaccinated. And in fact, immunocompromised individuals now can get a third dose to achieve a level of antibody response nearly equivalent to other individuals. So whoever you are, wherever you are, it is so important that you keep in mind your best protection against this virus are the incredible, safe, and now FDA-approved vaccine that's available for you here in the country. That's a part of what you need to do. The other parts of what you need to do are what we call multi-layered mitigation strategies. It's that idea that masks work. And no, Ron DeSantis is not on this call, but I'll say that again, masks work. Masks are important. They are a barrier for you and for somebody else. And when you put that in the dynamic of a Delta variant that is twice as transmissible, that has 1,000 times the viral load in somebody's nose, you need that mask. when you think about the fact that you've been vaccinated and you think that you are protected, and you very likely are, but even at its best, 1 in 20 vaccinated individuals could still get COVID as in the early days of this pandemic. And in the context of the Delta variant, that number increases to about 1 in 10. So you don't want to be that 1 in 10. Mask wearing is an important part of this dynamic. It does not mean that you're conceding that the vaccines don't work. It means that you are committed to making it through this pandemic, protecting your community, and ending this horrible situation. Multi-layered mitigation strategies means that in addition to masks, you are avoiding crowded places wherever and whenever you can. It means that you are maintaining that physical distance when appropriate, because listen, it is so important that we hold on just a little bit longer, that we use every tool that we've got, that we take everything we've learned over the course of this pandemic and apply it to this moment. I want to be clear, this Delta variant, it's different. Now, I've been watching this pandemic for a long time, and I can tell you it is different. It spreads farther, it spreads faster, it does more damage. It's so important that we use every skill that we've learned in this moment to get through. When we talk about vaccines, they're safe, they're effective. We have one that's FDA approved now. We talk about the coming need for boosters, and I'll just, preempt some of the questions. Boosters are because we want people to remain protected, not because we're conceding the vaccines don't work. And if we see any signal that that protection may wane, we want to make sure that we don't lose any ground. Everybody needs to remain protected, and the science is guiding us on when and how we should be doing those things. We need to make sure that we continue to watch our precious resources, like our healthcare system, that we're keeping people from getting sick so our hospitals don't become overrun, so that we don't have capacity issues like we're seeing in parts of the country where our team is rallying folks from the VA or from the Department of Defense or from the Commission Corps to try to help hospitals in other states, when in fact all we have to do is get vaccinated and use multi-layered mitigation strategies. Those are the things that we need to do to protect those individuals who have been on the front lines trying to protect you for these past 584 days. We've got to keep our schools open. We need our kids in school. I've got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. They're not old enough to be vaccinated, but it's so important for them from a socio-emotional standpoint to be in that building with those peers, with those teachers, in that space learning. We must protect that space at all costs. That means wearing masks. That means making sure that our teachers are supported and have the resources they need. It means that we're holding our school districts to a standard, because that's what we need to do to keep our babies in places where they remain safe. And again, this Delta variant is so unforgiving. We can't let our guard down. And I'll end with this. We've made it pretty far in these 584 days. 72 people tragically in Fauquier County have lost their lives. And we don't want anybody to lose their lives, not when it's so preventable as it is now. But there's more to COVID-19 than surviving. We want to make sure that we have opportunities to thrive. We want to make sure that our kids can participate in the activities that they love, that allow them to grow and progress and become the people of their dreams. We want to make sure that our churches are open and vibrant, and people are having those opportunities to engage in their faiths and in their community, the fellowship, and the way that brings life. We want to make sure that grandparents can spend time with grandbabies, that brothers and cousins and friends can come together in the way that they always do, because it's so important to navigate those mental health challenges. We don't just want to survive this pandemic. We want to get back to thriving. We can't take our eye off the ball. We have to understand that at the other side of this, we've got to address those systemic challenges. We have to address those cracks that were exposed in our society, because that is the better version of who we are, of where we are, and where we must be. I'm going to close there because I'm going to start getting pages from the hospital any minute now, but I want to thank you all so very much for inviting me to join you. I miss you. I'm so grateful for you, for the work that you do in community, for the work that you have done, you continue to do. It's critical. Please keep it up. Know that we're all pulling for you. We're pulling together. We'll make it. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Dr. Webb, we'd like to thank you so much for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to join us for our event tonight. Thank you for everything that you do. As a healthcare professional, you're on the front lines, and again, words can't say enough, but we want to thank you and your team for everything that you do. Certainly to everybody who had an opportunity to join us tonight, certainly to our distinguished guest, Delegate Guzman, my fellow colleagues on the Warrenton Town Council, Mayor Neville, Sheriff Moser, Chief Conscious, and everyone else. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for tonight's event. For those who know me and those who don't, my name is Renard Carlos. I am your Vice President of the Fauquier County NAACP. So I have three things to do tonight. One, in the very beginning of the program, you noticed there were some trivia questions, and I'm going to give you the answers for that. One was, where did the name Turnbull come from? The answer to that is the Turnbull family. Second question is, what is the percentage of the Black population to the total Fauquier County population today compared to 1960? The answer was C, which in 2019 it was 7.8, and in 1960 it was 25.9. Next question is, what is the name of the first Black elected countywide constitutional officer in Fauquier County? The answer for that is C. The answer is neither. It's somewhat of a trick question. John Mann and Donald Mason, one was on the Warrenton Town Council, the other is on the school board. The last question is, what year was the Fauquier County NAACP rechartered? And the answer for that is B. It was 1952. So to those who put some of those trivia questions together, thank you, that was fun. It is now my high honor and privilege to introduce this year's Fauquier County Branch Distinguished Citizen Award. And the idea for this award was to recognize individuals within Fauquier County who we felt exemplified the ideals and the mission of the Fauquier County NAACP. It is my pleasure to award that to this year's recipient, Karen White, who is the director of the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County. Whether it's been through the events such as June 19th, and there's the award, they're awesome. Whether it's been from June 19th celebration, they helped to add a little bit of a historical context to that, to highlighting the Rosenwald schools, to putting together Zoom events that highlight perhaps unknown names in Fauquier County and the history behind them. The Afro-American Historical Society has always been there. It's a pleasure to work with you guys, and we thank you for everything you do, but it's a bit more than that even. The context of history, we all certainly can remember great times in our minds and our history, and we remember sometimes not so pleasant ideas of history as well. The pleasant times we kind of run to, and the not so pleasant times in our own mind and our history, we kind of like to run away from those things. But folks who are students of history, they do not run. They shoulder the responsibility of reminding us of those positive things, those unknown names in history who maybe we didn't know. Maybe they're in our county, our town, our state, whomever. They share that with us. They also took on the incredible burden at times of reminding us of those unpleasant moments in history that it is imperative that we remember unless we repeat them. The role that the Afro-American Historical Society has done and continues to do in Fauquier County has been an asset to all of us. Karen, thank you so much for the work that you and your team do. It's a pleasure to work with you. We thank you for your commitment to the Fauquier County NAACP and also your friendship. Thank you. The next job I have tonight is to introduce our sponsors. It is very easy at times to see events going on around you and to get behind your computer screen or type something on Facebook and offer your solutions. But when it comes to putting your hands and rolling up your sleeves and getting to work, it sometimes is very rare to find folks to do that. It is even rarer at times to find folks who say, hey, I hear what you're doing. I see the need. I'm gonna jump in there and I'm gonna get to work with you as well. And then beyond that, it's even rarer to find folks that say, hey, I see the need. I'm willing to get in there and work with you. And I'm also gonna put some funds, some capital towards what you're working on. But that is specifically what some of our sponsors have done tonight. So at various tier levels, our tier 1 sponsors include the Remington Press, Colvin Floors, Latitude Fair Trade Store, Discovery Publications, Education and Training Services of Bilton, Carmen Rivera, State Farm, John Crone, Farmers at our Tier 5, Country Chevrolet, Oakview Bank, Mark B. Williams and Associates, Black Lives Matter, Vigil for Action, Fauquier Health, African American Historical Association of Fauquier County, Tidewater Ministries and Deacons Union, and Green Safe Carpet Cleaning. To each of those groups, we offer you our humblest thanks. You didn't just sit on the sidelines, but you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work and to see the value of this organization and what we're doing for the community. I will close with saying this. The funds that you guys give us, for this event, it just does not stop this event. If you take not a whole lot from this event, but please remember when somebody says, well, what does the NAACP of Fauquier County do? We only see you guys when it's time to vote, or we only see you guys for this. I want to share with you that this branch, under the leadership of President Weaver, their executive committee, and myself, we have challenged our groups to look specifically at the needs of the community and to address them. I want to share with you one thought for tonight. There are various groups in our organization who do tremendous work, but one of them is called Nourishing Our Neighbors. And that idea was simply to say there are folks in our community who are in need of a hot meal. And for no fault of their own, they don't have it. So what do? Well, that committee got together, they partnered with local restaurants and got some discounts on meals. And it was about going to restaurants saying, hey, here's who we are, here's what we want to do. Will you participate with us? And there are folks in restaurants in our community who said, absolutely. I had the privilege to join them on one of their missions. And first time we packed up our food, great activity. The folks who are looking for meals have let us know the exact location where they will be at, and we go drop off the food. The one experience I want to share with you is that I will never forget going to a location, looking for someone who said, hey, I'd definitely like a free meal. And we couldn't find them at first. And a gentleman said, hey, who are you looking for? And we said, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. He said, I know exactly where we are. Let me take you over to him. So we walked over, found the person, and delivered the food. And they were incredibly grateful. On the way back, I was walking with a gentleman, and he explained to me, he thought the work that the Fauquier County NAACP was doing was great. And the idea to provide meals, it was awesome. We perhaps going to be more different. He was my senior, I'm a bit younger. He was a little taller, I'm a little bit shorter, and it goes on and on. Different backgrounds completely. But the words that he said to me, I will never forget. He said, you know what? I think what you're doing is great. And I tell you, I didn't get a chance to sign up for the meals, but if you have anything left over, I'd appreciate it. I'm hungry too. The reality that an individual who had never met me, we could not be maybe even more different, saw the work and was willing to say, hey, no pride, no nothing. If you have anything extra, I'm hungry too. That is specifically the work that the Fauquier County NAACP is doing. We are looking in our community, whether it is health projects, nourishing our neighbors, educational scholarships, voter registrations, that is what we do. And to each one of our sponsors and to each one of you who've taken the time to listen tonight and to participate, thank you. To our sponsors, thank you again, and we look forward to working with you in the future. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Weaver, who will have some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much. I think can everyone hear me? Kind of nod your head? All right. I'd like to thank each of you for allowing us to use your home tonight. And I'm sure your beautiful homes made the perfect setting for this entire celebration. Our special thanks must also go to the fundraising committee, who has worked so tirelessly to make this event a success. And we are super appreciative to Premier Hospitality for the outstanding and extraordinary Zoom presentation of this celebration. This event, of course, has to end. Even though it has ended, it doesn't stop. It will soon be time to be thinking about organizing this event for 2023. I know I have enjoyed tonight's fundraising celebration enormously, and I hope that you have also. So immediately following the benediction, you are invited to stay for the unforgettable grand finale with the singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing, considered to be the Black national anthem. For any of you who have ever gone into Washington, D.C. on the 4th of July, when they had the fireworks around the Washington Monument, they have a lot of boom, 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 but there comes that time when that cluster of bombs and lights and flashes and noise go off all at the same time, and it is called the grand finale. I'm very sure, and I hope, when you hear the song, Lift Every Voice and Sing, it will create that type of interaction. Now, let me just say one thing about this song for those of you who may not be familiar with it. It's a masterpiece within itself that has been brought out by the Black experience in America. The song was originally written as a poem by James Weldon Johnson, and later set to music by his younger brother, John Rosamond Johnson. Tonight's rendition of the anthem will be sung by the We Are the Future Big Band from the Berklee College of Music in Boston. So please stay online. So as I leave, I want to say to each of you, stay safe, be blessed, and stay vertical. See you next year. Good night.
Let us pray. Our Father, is once again we come to thank you for waking us up this morning. Then we thank you, Lord, for our president of the NAACP chapter. We pray, oh God, you bless each officer, bless all of those who have tuned in for the celebration this evening. We ask, oh God, you just go with us and stand by us under him that is able to keep us from falling and to present us faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy, to the only wise God, our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forevermore. Amen. Amen.
Here we go. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Oh, sing. I said, sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Victory, yeah, yeah, yeah. Listen here. Stony the road we trod, bitter the task in raw, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with the steady beat have not these weary feet come to the place for which our fathers, oh Lord, they sighed, yeah. No. Oh, when tears have been, I'm telling you, we have come, treading the path, blood of the gloomy past, till now we stand here at last. Yeah, true to our God, true to our native land. Yeah. Oh, you got to stay true to you. Oh, you do. Ooh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Oh, yeah, yeah. Come on, go, 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 go. Let me hear you say it. Come on, say we. Tell everybody that you know. Let me hear you say we. You too. Say we. Come on, come on, come on. If you don't know, now you know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Soon and very soon, we are going to see the King. Soon and